Construction of granny flats. Think about adding a granny flat to your property. Before you start building, you need to understand how the banks value these projects. Hi, I'm Jeremy. Today we're going to break down how the banks will treat valuations for granny flat construction purposes. So if you can, the bank funding, you want to listen closely and make sure that this transaction doesn't break your budget. So what is it? Well, a granny flat is a secondary dwelling built on an existing residential property. So that could be someone that owns a owner-occupier or investment property with some existing land. It can be detached or attached depending on the design of the dwelling and the council approvals. And there's been a lot of positive work around council approvals in recent years, being flexible with these secondary dwellings. And so the banks view granny flat constructions differently from a standalone dwelling. The critical point is the banks won't always completely recognise the end construction value of the granny flat when they're assessing that property value. And this will depend on the valuer and their specific opinion on the deal. So how does it work? So when you fund a granny flat construction, the valuer will come in and they will value up the project on an as-if complete basis. Valuation meaning that they will assess what they believe the property or the two dwellings will be worth once it's complete, not what the valuation on the current dwelling or what the market valuation may be at that point, but what they think is going to be worth it at the end of the completion. And so that is something to be really mindful of when you're entering these type of transactions around how does the valuer assess it. They may come in, they may be quite conservative with their valuation opinion, and so you need to understand that what are your other options if that valuation doesn't come in line with what we think we're going to get that uplift at the end of the valuation. And so some banks will treat the granny flat as income producing improvement, so that's great for investors, while others may limit or cap the actual overall yield of that proposed rental income coming in. So it's got to be really mindful around one, understanding the specific valuer's position on the valuation. They may be conservative, they may market at what we think is a fair and reasonable market valuation. And then secondly, the bank's approach towards that rental yield. So some banks may take that full uplift in dollar rental value, which can help for serviceability, and some banks may actually cap it as a percentage on the yield on the valuation of that property. So it's something to be very mindful of. Some other things to think about is, where the property is located, so location, market demand, and comparable sales. So that's really important around getting what are some like-for-like sales that have gone through the area that we think is fair and reasonable as a comparison around that valuation. Because if you're looking to do a granny flat, which is potentially in a new area or it's a significant improvement in what's around, you may find that that's where we have a shortfall in that valuation on that report. And depending, which we'll get to in a second, depending on your cash flow position, that can have a detrimental impact on the ability to actually go forward and get this done. So who's this suitable for? So obviously property owners looking to get an extra source of rental income, families that are wanting to accommodate potentially building out so they can house their elderly relatives or adult children. It's very common in this type of market when there's a rental shortage. And then also investors just looking to boost their yields in established suburbs. Who's this not suitable for? So this could be properties that already have a very high LVR, not giving us that wiggle room in case that valuation doesn't come in at what you think the cost will be or the end value. Owners hoping for a dollar for dollar valuation increase. So let's say that the construction of the granny flat is going to cost you $300,000, expecting an exact $300,000 uplift on that construction valuation can deem a problem. You may get that valuation at the end when the market's got that comparables and it's complete, but during that build you may struggle. And then areas where there's low demand for dual living arrangements. And again, this is probably just as a market trend, not as such a key issue to consider, because more and more we're seeing these type of arrangements with people becoming a bit more resourceful around the land available and making sure it's put to better use in terms of having additional living options on parcels of land. So before you start your granny flat project, it's vital to get some advice around how your bank or your funder will treat that valuation. So if you want to plan your project and check your borrowing capacity, get in touch with myself, Jeremy. Happy to guide you through it and some of the pros and cons, put together a bit of a comparative market report that we can give to the valuer, and then we can understand exactly how feasible it is to go through and fund this granny flat construction. So thank you again for watching. If you found this helpful and like to share with someone thinking about a granny flat, see you in the next video. Thank you.